In February of the year 1913, I made up my mind to go to Turkey for a few months in order to escape an atmosphere that sickened me. The English press and public had, in this 20th century, responded with fanaticism to the cry of a crusade against the Turk, raised by some cunning Balkan rulers. And that fanaticism had been fostered, as it seemed to my intelligence, by British statesmen, not for their country's ends, but for the ends and in the interests of Russia, our great Eastern rival. The solidarity of Christendom against a Muslim power was reckoned a fine thing by many people, but it broke the heart of Englishmen who loved the East. For what had England stood for until then in India and throughout her Eastern Empire? Had she not stood for universal tolerance, for a nationality which should be independent of religious differences? The Turks of their own will espoused the same ideal, since when they had been plundered and attacked on all hands. And what had England done but smile upon their persecutors? The concert of the powers, the peace of Europe, must be preserved at all costs, we were told, even at the cost, a slight one in the view of politicians, of national prestige and honour. Oh, Europe, Europe, is it all the world? Nobody thought of Asia looking on. And if one mentioned it, he was informed that Asia did not count, being uncivilized, and, what appeared to many a conclusive argument, outside the pale of Christianity. It seemed to me that there were two kinds of Christianity, one which would limit its benevolence to Christian peoples, the other which regarded the world with all its creeds and races as the theatre for Christian charity and Christian justice. The first, which still prevailed in Russia and the Balkan states, and still could claim adherents here in England, was essentially the same fanaticism which we blame so loudly when it appears in the more ignorant Mohammedans. The second gave the spirit of our Eastern Empire, the spirit of humanity and tolerance which one associates with modern life. If we, England, discarded the second and embraced the first, though only in appearance, and from motives of high policy concerned with Russia, the literal-minded East, observant of our conduct step by step, would call us liars. More? There was, shall I go on? Or, more or not?
Yeah, you should keep going.
Keep going.
Pick it up a bit.
Keep an eye on the stations.
Yeah, okay.
There was, besides, another aspect of the case. The East was waking, though the bulk of it lay still unconscious, wrapped in its traditions like our medieval forebears. It had been my lot in early youth to be immersed in the unconsciousness of the old East, to receive its spirit for a season and to know its charm. Since then I had observed with some annoyance the various attacks of conscious Europe on unconscious Asia, and the stirring of the latter towards a consciousness akin to ours. It had been strange to see the men responsible for that awakening shrink back in horror, as did Frankenstein before his monster, trying frantically but in vain to wreck their work. To me, it seemed unreason near to madness for us English even to attempt to stop a movement which owed its inspiration largely to the work of Englishmen and English governments. And such attempts, I thought, would certainly entail a heavy penalty. The conscious nations, striving selfishly for their own ends, failed altogether to remark the obvious historic truth, that it was the thing they strove it was the thing they strove not for that came to pass inevitably. In other words, that a natural nemesis attended brutal egotism in the world of nations as surely as that of individuals. Again, in other words, that God exists. Because the penalty was not immediate, it was disregarded by our politicians. But such short-sightedness in men paid and appointed to see well and far deserved the nation's censure. Turkey, a country in close touch with Europe, was the head of the progressive movement in the East, the natural head, the sanest head that could be chosen, for the Turk was capable of understanding Europe and acting as interpreter to those behind him. If we cut off that head, as Russia, our ally, and other powers desired to do, 100 mad fanatic heads would rise instead of it. A monster would be formed which would devour our children. Or so it seemed to me when I set off for Turkey, nor have I since seen anything to change my view. People in a position to be well informed assured me I was altogether wrong, because the Turks were hopelessly demoralized, the revolution had turned out a ghastly failure, and so on. They told me to go to Constantinople and see for myself. I had not been there for some 18 years. My more recent knowledge of the Ottoman Empire, intimate though it was, being practically restricted to the Arab provinces. I had therefore no reply to make to such opponents, though I knew their judgment faulty, except to take their advice and go and judge for myself. Accordingly, having been well supplied with introductions by the kindness of some friends, I set out to investigate the state of Turkey as far as might be from a Turkish point of view. The result of that investigation may be gathered from this little work, which first appeared as a series of articles in the New Age. In it, I have endeavoured to portray the state of things which I beheld, both good and evil, fairly, hiding nothing. For obvious reasons, I have altered or suppressed the names of my associates. I have also, here and there, condensed a conversation, or merged a number of occasions into one, and leaving out the usual tourist business of description, I have treated mainly of the things which struck me as significant. Apart from this, the narrative is unembellished. I hope that it will not be found uninteresting.